Hello everyone, welcome back to another IGCSE Mathematics tutorial. Today we'll be discussing the third topic in the second chapter, equations. First, we'll talk about constructing expressions, equations, and formulas. Some questions will give you a problem in words and ask you to construct an expression or an equation based upon the information you were given. An example question would be write an expression for the product of two consecutive even numbers. Let's take our y as our result and x as our first even number. The difference between any two consecutive even numbers is always 2. 2 plus 2 is 4, which is the next even number, and so on. So our second even number can be expressed as x plus 2. X is our first even number. Our final answer would be y equals x multiplied by x plus 2. Our first even number multiplied by our second even number. Questions of this type will not be limited to simple equations and will include simultaneous equations too. Let's talk about solving linear equations in one unknown. This is the easiest and simplest type of equation and will be the basis of everything going forward. There is only one unknown variable. Other terms, your y, your z, your whatever, will be constants or given variables. Let's take an example. 3x plus 4 equals 10. Sometimes in the exam this could be 3x plus 4 equals 2y, and then in the word problem they'll tell you that the y is 10. So in reality it's just 3x plus 4 equals to 10. To solve this, we need to isolate the x on one side of the equal sign. We can do this by subtracting 4 from both sides and then dividing both sides by 3. 3x plus 4 minus 4 equals to 10 minus 4, so 3x equals to 6. You divide both sides by 3 to get x equals to 2. That's your final answer. Practice this with more complicated equations such as this one. 5 minus 2x equals to 3, brackets x plus 7. Let's talk about linear. Let's continue. Let's take a look at another complicated example. X divided by 2x plus 1 equals to 4. To solve this, first we multiply both sides by 2x plus 1 to remove that denominator. From there we can subtract x from both sides and then subtract 4 from both sides, and our last step is to divide both sides by 7 to get our final answer, as shown. X equals to 4 multiplied by 2x plus 1, which gives us 8x plus 4. So we subtract x from both sides, 0 equals to 7x plus 4. We subtract 4 from both sides, minus 4 equals to 7x, divided by 7 to get our x. X equals to minus 4 over 7, that's our final answer. Let's talk about simultaneous equations. Let's take a look at an example equation. 7x plus 2y equals to 23. We are obviously unable to solve this as it has two unknown variables, our x and our y. Let's take a look at another equation, 3x plus 2y equals to 11. Just like the first one, we're unable to solve it on its own, but together we can solve them. This is the substitution method. First, we'll isolate one of the unknowns. Then we subtract 3x from both sides in equation 2 to get 2y equals to 11 minus 3x. We divide both sides by 2 to get y equals to 11 minus 3x, all divided by 2. Now we have the value of 1y. We've isolated it. We can plug this into the first equation instead of the y. So we get 7x plus 11 minus 3x, which is in reality just 11 minus 3x over 2 multiplied by 2 because the equation has 2y in it. So we've multiplied the value that we found by 2, we just remove the denominator, equals to 23. From here we can just solve for x as we normally would. 4x equals to 12, x equals to 3, and then we can plug this into y equals to 11 minus 3x divided by 2 to get y equals to 1. 11 minus 3x, which would be 3 times multiplied by 3, which is 9 to get 2. 2 divided by 2 gives us 1. Let's talk about quadratic equations. A quadratic equation is an equation where we have one unknown with a maximum power of 2. Their standard form is this: ax squared plus bx plus c equals to 0, where a and b are coefficients of x squared and x respectively, and c is any constant. These can be solved in various methods: the factorization method, the quadratic formula, and completing the square. It is important that one side of the equal sign is equal to 0, as this allows us to solve the equation. Make sure to manipulate all terms to one side of the equal sign to reach this form where one side would be 0 and the other form is in ax squared plus bx plus c. Let's talk about the first method, factorization. Let's take this equation as an example. X squared plus 10x plus 16 equals to 0. To factorize it, we write it down as two brackets being multiplied together, and each bracket is a factor of the original equation, which is why it's called factorization. The first step, find all the factor pairs that multiply together to get our c, which is 16. In this case, these are 1 and 16, 2 and 8, and 4 and 4. And keep in mind that because 16 is positive, two negative numbers multiplied together will also give you a positive 16. So, minus 1 and minus 16 work as a pair, minus 2 and minus 8, and minus 4 and minus 4. The next step is to find which pair of these pairs adds up to give us our b. Our b here is 10. So, 1 and 16 added together is 17. That's obviously wrong. 4 and 4 would give us 8. 2 and 8 would give us 10, which is our b. So 2 and 8 is the correct answer. Our final step is to write out these brackets like so, in this form. X plus 2 multiplied by x plus 8. If you want to double check this to make sure you are correct, you can multiply out the brackets and see if it matches the original equation. Let's continue. To solve this previous equation to get our values for x, we can simply solve each bracket on its own. Because we know the whole equation is equal to 0, one of the terms would equal 0. To get 0 as a result of multiplication, something has to be multiplied by 0. So we can take each term on its own if it equals 0. X plus 2 equals to 0 would give us x equals to minus 2. That's our first answer, if the first bracket is equal to 0. If the second bracket is equal to 0, x plus 8 equals to 0, x equals minus 8. That's our second answer. All quadratic equations will have two answers. Sometimes they could be the same number, but they are still two answers. Sometimes they could be the same number, one time positive and one time negative. They are still two answers. Like I said, this is possible because our equation equals to 0, so one of the brackets being multiplied together will always equal to 0. Let's talk about our second method, the quadratic formula. Some questions will ask you to give answers to a certain number of decimal places or insert form. These questions are implying that you solve by using this quadratic formula, where our b is the term in the original equation, same with the a and the c. You will notice that the root can either be positive or negative, which is why you will have to solve it twice, once with a plus sign and once with a minus sign to get both your answers. Like I said, every quadratic equation has two answers. Remember, if the answer is insert form, if you're asked to give it insert form, to simplify it down as much as possible and write the answer down. Make sure to check all your signs. This is a common mistake where people go wrong. One of the negative signs will be a positive sign or the opposite. Make sure to double check all your signs when you're doing both types, once with the positive sign, once with the negative sign. Our third method, completing the square. Some questions will first ask you to write down the equation in the form x plus b squared plus q equals to 0, which is the completed square form we discussed in one of our earlier videos. These questions will then tell you to solve this equation to find x. To do this, we subtract q from both sides to move q to the other side of the equal sign. To get x plus b squared equals to minus q, we find the square root of both sides to remove the square. So we get x plus b equals to the positive root of q and the negative root of q, two separate answers. Then we subtract b from both sides to isolate the x. Our final answer will be x equals to the positive root of q minus b and the negative root of q minus b, both of our answers. Finally, we have solving simultaneous equations with one nonlinear unknown, so one of the equations will be a quadratic equation. If you are asked to answer a simultaneous equation where one of the equations is a quadratic, first you will do as before and isolate one of the unknowns to be able to substitute it into the other equation. You'll isolate the y, for example, to get the value of y, then you insert that into the other equation. Instead of the y, to get all values of x, you expand all the brackets and everything to write it down into our standard quadratic form, ax squared plus bx plus c. You solve it with any of the previous three methods to get your answers for x. Then, once you've done that, you have your answers for x, two answers as always. You can plug them into your second equation, the equation you've made for y, to get your values for y. Once again, you should have two answers for x and two answers for y. Once you've done all that, make sure to double check by plugging your answers into the equations to make sure that they match. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment any feedback you have or any questions you may want answered, and check out our channel for other videos.